Hi, I'm Dave. The USA has just imposed tariffs on Chinese EVs sold in the USA that total to over 102%. At the same time, Zeekr, a very large Chinese EV manufacturer, has just launched an IPO on Wall Street, and the rich and the super rich have queued up to invest in it. Hi, I'm Dave. Let's see what's going on, so stick around as Dave takes on what's happening with China. Well, it seems to be, at first glance, just pure profit over ethics. It's a great idea in principle if you yourself, as a country or an industry, can't produce EVs cheaply enough to be able to beat the competition, is just put up tariffs or barriers and stop the cheaper ones coming into the country. It's been done so many times before. It's got a name. It's called protectionism, and it works. If the Chinese EVs, which would have come into the country at say $15,000 or $20,000, now come in at $30,000 or $40,000 or $50,000, they're going to be seen as no better than the locally produced stuff, and they won't sell. Simple as that. So it has a short-term benefit. It will stop the EVs coming in from China in this case, and it will allow your own home industry, the factories, the EV factories and the manufacturers, battery manufacturers and everything, it will allow them time to be able to get up to mass production and start producing their own cars in direct competition, which will be better. You can play on the fact that they're made in the USA, they're made locally, they're employing people, so you've got an awful lot going for you. So if that is the case, then a tariff short term would be a really good thing. Once your industry is up to speed and you are producing a decent amount of EVs, you've got the mass producing, bringing the cost down, and so you can now compete with anyone else, including the Chinese, and still sell your cars. Simple as that. So at that point, you might not want the tariffs anymore. People are used to buying your car, and your car might be quite a lot cheaper, so even if you take the tariffs off, it will still be competitive for people to buy your locally produced car. But of course, that totally ignores the profit element of it. The rich people. So Zeekr is a Chinese company. It's an EV manufacturer. It has been growing dramatically recently, and it is wanting to attack the second biggest market in the world, which is the United States. It was. I'm not sure it is anymore. That market is falling, and Europe is growing a little bit. Europe might be about to overtake it. I don't have the exact figures, but it doesn't matter. The second biggest market is either Europe or America. And Zeekr has now overtaken companies like NIO, Xpeng. They're actually one of the upcoming ones. So they've just launched onto Wall Street, an IPO. This is a public listing, so they can sell shares in their company and people can invest in it. And of course, what happens? You've got Zeekr, which is doing quite well at the moment. I'm not saying there's anything going to go wrong in the future. I'm just saying at the moment it's looking rather good and promising. So they've just launched onto Wall Street. Wall Street, most of you will know, is American. It's the American stock exchange or financial institution. So you've launched a Chinese company onto the Wall Street stock exchange, and the rich and super rich were queuing up. Now, some of them were ordinary investors like you or me, but others were institutions, the pension funds and the private equity companies and everything. And they were queuing up to buy this because there's profit to be made. And in fact, there were so many people piling into this one in the early days that within a few hours of opening, the shares had gone up about 35 pence on the price they launched at. So a number of people made a really good killing. Just out of interest, if ever you see one of these, don't invest at this point because the killing's been made already. These people will be dumping their shares at the end of the day or end of the week, cashing in on that profit, and then the shares will come down again and they'll settle down to whatever level they are. So if you're not in on day one, I would suggest just wait and see what happens longer term. It could be that the Zeekr will grow as a company and become worth investing in as a company, not as a startup, quick profit, or it could be that they go bust and everybody loses. But that's my attitude. Don't take my advice. You get your own advice. Anything. But in this case, you've got a conflict that the government is trying to ban Chinese cars, but the rich and the investment funds and the pension funds are buying up shares in Chinese manufacturers. And that's really just comes down to someone putting profits over ethics or morals. In other words, I know we should be banning all Chinese. I know we shouldn't be encouraging Zika, but there's money to be made. So let's just get a little bit of money in and see what happens. And it's really a problem because the money is taking over everywhere that you go. And it's forcing us to have different views on what's actually happening out there. But also have a look at Zika and Neo and Xpeng and BYD. And all of these companies are starting to invest in Mexico. Now, they go there because it's cheaper to manufacture in Mexico than it is in America. Come back to that in a minute. But they go there because it's cheaper. But the main reason they can benefit from that cheaper labour is because the government has launched something called the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act. And what this does is this gives grants and subsidies and tax breaks to companies who manufacture in America. And America, for this purpose, includes Mexico. Why does it include Mexico? Well, because most of the American car companies have factories in Mexico because they're cheaper. If you have a GM plant, a General Motors or a Ford plant in Detroit, you can build your cars down in Mexico, then import them legally. Any tariffs and subsidies or any subsidies and grants and tax breaks are applicable because you're staying within America, and you can get an advantage from that. So likewise, BYD, they will have exactly the same. If they open up a factory in Mexico, they first of all will be able to get the cheaper labour rates, not as cheap as over in China, I don't think, but cheap anyhow. But they will also be able to export the cars from Mexico straight into Europe. There will be no tariffs, and they will get any subsidies from the IRA. So it's a win-win-win. It's a magnificent thing, and it's one I'm sure the US government has not thought through properly. If you put a 100% tariff on Chinese imports, and one of those companies, doesn't matter which one it is, they go to Mexico, they open up a factory there, and then they start legally importing cars over the border into the US and claiming the subsidies and tax breaks and the grants. There's nothing that the government can do to stop that because General Motors and Ford and Stellantis and everyone else is already doing it. So you'd have to try and come up with a law which says, well, we can stop the Chinese, but we can't stop the General Motors ones or the Ford ones. And then it gets difficult. Well, what is an American-made one? For example, Ford, if they are making an EV and they buy the batteries from China, that is, although it's manufactured in Mexico, not America, but it's put together in America, but the batteries are Chinese and the screens from Taiwan and the everything's from everywhere else. So you then have to start looking at each individual car and saying, well, this one's X% American, X% this, X% that, and therefore this one does get free access into the market. It just becomes absolutely, totally unworkable. So this tariff thing is a short-term measure. And if it was going to be used to help the local manufacturers, the General Motors, the Fords, the Stellantis, the Chevrolets, all of those, if it gave them the opportunity to catch up with the Chinese and start producing some really good cars, that would be great. It won't, because that's not what they're doing. All of those, General Motors, Ford, everything else, they've virtually abandoned their EV plans and they're heading back towards hybrids and petrol cars, ICE cars. So they're not going to use it for that. They're just going to use it as a pure block. And if it's a pure block, all China will do is just go, oh, let's just set up manufacturing in Mexico. You can even go down there and buy a factory. They're probably already made down there. And then all they have to do is ship the components in, get a few locally supplied parts, and then start supplying legally into America. I don't think anyone's thought this one through properly. I don't think this is going to work. I think this is going to end up a mess. And the bigger thing is, of course, what will happen now is the Chinese will just put tariffs on American stuff. So For example, any Americans trying to sell cars into China, oh, no chance, you've now got 100% tariff. You couldn't sell them before, now 100% tariff, you can't sell them again. They'll also put a tariff if they're exporting batteries into America. So your General Motors, your Fords, your Stellantis will now be buying much, much dearer batteries from China, because the world's largest battery manufacturer is in China, two of them, CATL and BYD. So you're going to have to force them to go out to Taiwan or Japan, so for Panasonic or LG, and it restricts the market and the price they're able to buy at. So there's a massive amount going on, and what a lot of people don't seem to realise is that it's all interrelated. It comes down to who needs who the most. You see, if China takes over the rest of the world with EVs, it's already sending cars into the Japanese market, which is a large market. It's starting to become a big manufacturer in Europe. It's very big already in Asia. Do they actually need the American market? And the answer is, I don't think they need it. I think they might want it, but they don't need it. So, yeah, okay, let's just put 100% tariff on American stuff. They'll put 100% on ours. Let's not send anything there. It's just a waste of time. Let's concentrate on the rest of the world and take over the whole of the rest of the world. That means that Americans, factories, will no longer be able to sell anywhere else in the world, because the Chinese will be selling subsidised EVs into the rest of the world. They are not going to be able to export a car made in America at a higher labour cost and a higher price abroad into Europe or Asia or Australia, Taiwan, Singapore, anywhere like that. They won't be able to do it. So I see this coming to a catastrophic crash at some point, and it'll just have to be stopped. The idea is great. Let's just keep the Chinese out, and we can then start producing cars that our people will buy. The reality is the Chinese actually make pretty good cars, and they're really cheap, and that's what people want to buy. People do not want to buy a Ford Mustang Mach-E at $60,000 when they could go and get a BYD Super Duper Sports at about $30,000, or a Hyundai for $35,000-$40,000. They just want the better car. So it's going to end in tears. So anyway, thanks for watching. I'm Dave. If you've enjoyed this, click the like button. If you would like to see more, please subscribe, click the notification bell, and that means we'll notify you every time we launch a new video. I'm Dave.